women, it was in the Atlantic. I think the name of the article was Separating Sports by Sex Doesn't Make Sense. It does. Of course, they actually wrote the line. It was something like, keeping the binary in sports reinforces the idea that men are bigger and stronger and faster than women.
Mhm.
That's not an idea.
Uh-huh.
You see what I mean about, like, this is insanity.
What is up, everyone? In this clip, we're diving into a clip from the Club Random podcast where Bill Maher was absolutely stunned by Jordan Peterson's take on how modern parenting has accidentally created a generation of wokeists. Peterson's theory is that older parents, fewer siblings, and a breakdown in generational wisdom have led to a culture where kids are, well, a little too self-important. And honestly, after going through this clip myself, you might start wondering if your cousin's kid who lectures you about pronouns at Thanksgiving is a product of this exact phenomenon. So let's just get into this clip where I'll be giving you my unfiltered take and covering these points in depth with you guys here, so let's get into it.
But it was said by some kid who's young enough to think it's true or just want it to be true, and no adult ever said, no, that's just crazy.
So I've been trying to figure out why this has happened, and you can generically attribute it to a kind of moral decay, but that's not very precise. And so there's a bunch of things that have happened in the last 60 years that I think have contributed to this. And some of them are very complex. So one of them is parents are a lot older than they used to be, right? They have many, many fewer children.
Yes.
Right. And so that's a really interesting one because that means that comparatively speaking, each child is hyper valued. And obviously there's some utility in that, but there's some real danger in it too.
Yes.
Children don't have a lot of siblings. And the thing about siblings is they take the narcissism out of you because siblings compete like mad for attention. And if you're like center of the universe among your brothers and sisters, they're not going to be very happy about that.
Right.
Right. So like, and parents now are as old as grandparents were historically.
Yeah.
Right. So those are radical shifts. And there's another thing that I've noticed too, is that because the separation between the generations now is longer in terms of years by double.
All right, let's pause here because Peterson, to be honest, is hitting on two massive points here. First, when he talks about siblings. Siblings are like the universe's way of keeping you humble. You can't be a little tyrant when you've got brothers and sisters calling you out on your nonsense. I mean, they're your first critiques, your first rivals, and your first teammates. But without that dynamic, you've got kids who've never been told no, who've never had to share the spotlight, and who think the world revolves around them. But guess what that leads to? A bunch of adults that think their feelings are more important than facts. Now layer on the second point that Peterson made when he says parents today are as old as grandparents used to be. So what does that mean exactly? It means we've lost a ton of wisdom. Your great grandma probably had 10 kids who knew how to handle a tantrum like a pro. She didn't need a parenting book or a TikTok influencer tell her how to raise her kids. She had generations of knowledge passed down to her. But now, parents are Googling how to discipline a toddler because they've got no one to turn to for advice. This is the double whammy Peterson's talking about. Fewer siblings means kids are growing up without natural checks and balances, and that comes from sharing attention and resources. And older parents combined with a massive generational gap means we've disrupted the natural flow of knowledge. It's like we've thrown out the parenting playbook and replaced it with a bunch of conflicting advice from strangers on the internet. No wonder we're raising a generation of wokeists. Nobody knows what they're doing anymore, and the kids are running the show. What do you guys think? Are we raising a generation of narcissists because we've lost the village it takes to raise a child? Or is this just the natural evolution of society? Let me know in the comments below, but let's get into these other points.
There's also there's real impediments to the intergenerational transmission of knowledge about parenting. Like I was just working with my son the other day with a little bit of a discipline problem he was having with his 14-month-old who was getting pretty bossy. And my son doesn't take a lot of nonsense. He's not a pushover, but he didn't know what to do. And I suggested to him what to do. I told him what to do, but he couldn't do it. I went there with him and showed him how to do it, and then he could do it. But he couldn't do it by being told. And
what were you doing with the kid?
well, when she got squawky and demanding, I I just put her in the crib. So
Oh, I
just
see.
squawk until you're done, and then you can come out again. And as soon as
Right.
you're peaceful, you can come out.
I see.
Because
And
by
even at that age, they
oh,
can get,
absolutely,
they get that?
9 months.
Really?
9 months. Oh yes, absolutely. Now it depends on the kid. Like
Right.
not all kids are going to be like that, but
Right.
the kids that are more extroverted and disagreeable are going to be like that.
But even
So-
before they can talk, they can think.
Oh, well, it can,
Well, obviously
yes, they don't. First of all,
they're understanding that you're making a demand of them.
oh well, and kids are going to use whatever whatever tools they have at hand
They're so
to get
Machiavellian.
attention.
Yes, they're
Well,
Machiavellian
Yes,
kids.
yes, they are. They
Yeah.
are, and some kids are more Machiavellian than others, and
Yeah.
there can be real advantages in that too.
Right.
Like a kid who isn't a pushover can be socialized with extreme precision, right? Because they're pushing, they're checking out to see where the boundaries are, and so they can really learn to be socially sophisticated. But they're also a handful. So, you don't get a benefit without a cost. Anyways, it was interesting to watch because even though he's not a pushover, he couldn't figure out exactly what to do without having it acted out. And so now we're extending the gap between generations. And so I think we've interfered with the intergenerational transmission of parenting knowledge. And it's not that easy to know when to put a disciplinary boundary on a child. It's a very complicated thing to do. And it's hard on mothers in particular because up till the age of about 9 months, whenever your child manifests any sign of distress, your job as a mother is to assume the child is 100% correct and fix the distress. But at some point, there's a transition because
Right.
a lot of the distress now becomes anger, and it can become manipulative anger. And so now you have to step back and you have to think, well, now, kid, everything that you're bitching about, you can't get.
Right.
But it's really hard for mothers to make that transition because they've had to care for this creature for like 9 months and do exactly what they were bidden to do immediately. And all of that was appropriate. And so there's a complex shift that has to take place. And it isn't obvious to me that people can do that alone. So there's lots of factors that have led to this.
Awesome, and I think this is where Peterson really drives the point home. He's talking about the critical transition in parenting when you have to stop coddling and start setting boundaries. And let's be honest, this is where a lot of modern parents are dropping the ball. Up until about 9 months, yeah, sure, your job as a parent is to respond to every cry, every whimper, every sign of distress. But at some point, that distress turns into anger, and not just anger, but manipulative anger. Kids are smart, way smarter than we give them credit for. They figure out pretty quickly that if they scream loud enough, they'll get what they want. But here's the thing, if you don't make that transition, if you don't start saying, no kid, you can't have everything you're bitching about, you're setting them up for failure. And it's not just about discipline, it's about teaching them how to navigate a world that doesn't revolve around them. Because guess what? The real world doesn't care about their feelings. The real world isn't going to hand them a trophy just for showing up. I think parents today are so terrified of damaging their kids' self-esteem that they let them run wild. They're so worried about being their kid's friend that they forget to be their parent. And the result, a generation of adults who think the world owes them something, who can't handle criticism, and who think their feelings should dictate reality. Parents need to set boundaries, say no, and teach their kids that they can't always get what they want. And yeah, I know it's hard to hear your kid cry, it's hard to deal with the tantrums, but it's necessary. Because if you don't, you're not just raising a spoiled kid, you're raising a future adult who thinks the world should bend to their will, and trust me, that's not doing them any favors. Of course, as always, I'd love to hear what you guys think. Are we too soft on kids these days? Are we so worried about their self-esteem that we're forgetting to teach them resilience? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you guys in the next one.